Hello, everyone. I am Deborah Cohen, and today's episode is a little different. What I'm about to share with you is adapted from the final chapter of my book, forthcoming, Judeo-Christian America, scheduled for release on July 4th, 2026, during America's 250th anniversary year. But I felt compelled to release this chapter early. Why? Because something unusual seems to be happening in America right now. Not politically alone, not economically, but spiritually. There are moments in history when a nation begins asking deeper questions again. Questions about meaning. Questions about identity. Questions about morality. Questions about exhaustion. And perhaps most importantly, questions about rest. Over the past several years, we've watched Americans become more connected than ever before, and yet somehow more anxious, more distracted, more divided, more emotionally depleted, more spiritually exhausted. And now there are growing conversations, still informal, still uncertain, surrounding the idea of a national day of reflection or sacred rest connected to May 15th, 2026. Now, whether anything official ultimately happens or not, I believe the conversation itself matters, because maybe what Americans are truly searching for is not another political slogan. Maybe they are searching for stillness, for grounding, for sacred time. And that's what today's episode is about. I will be right back after this brief message. Yes, break. I never expected my life to become a memoir.
I gotta move a little longer, and I will be much stronger. And I'm running hard and free to be me, to be me. My body glides in stealth motion like a locomotion. I see the track in front of me.
When the night finally came, I could barely breathe from the excitement. The stage lights hit my face, warm and golden. I strapped on my Les Paul, the same one I still own, and we launched into Take It Easy, Take It Easy. Follow if you believe pain can become purpose. And again, this is Deborah Cohen, and if you're watching live, I invite you to put something in the chat. I believe that I am on Facebook this morning on my profile, Deborah Cohen, and we're also on YouTube this morning, and the handle is at Jewish Rock Music. So let us begin with this topic. There are moments when dates begin to matter. There are moments when a date begins to carry meaning before it is ever formally declared. May 15th, 2026 may be becoming one of those dates in America, not yet codified in law, not yet universally observed, but increasingly discussed as a day that could call Americans back to something they have long forgotten: sacred rest. Now, I want to be careful here. I'm not predicting the future. I am not announcing legislation. I'm not claiming certainty. What I am observing is a growing cultural hunger, a feeling, a shift, a realization that modern life may be moving too fast for the human soul. And honestly, I think many people already feel this. You can sense it when people talk about burnout. You can sense it when families say they never sit together anymore. You can sense it when people admit they feel addicted to their phones. Or when they say silence makes them uncomfortable. Or when they confess they can't remember the last day they truly rested. Not just physically, but emotionally, mentally, spiritually. And perhaps that is why the idea of sacred rest suddenly feels relevant again. Let's take a station break, and I will be right back.
Hey everyone, I'm in New York City walking toward the July 4th celebration for America 250. The energy is incredible, so many flags and people. This is for America's 250th. It's so inspiring.
And again, this is Deborah Cohen, and you're listening to my weekly podcast, which airs every Sunday morning at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time on YouTube. The handle, again, is at Jewish Rock Music, and also on my Facebook profile. So I'm going to continue on with this interesting proposed national holiday that's coming up, if it happens, on May 15th. America once understood sacred pause. There was a time in America when the idea of sacred pause was not controversial. It was normal. For much of early American history, a weekly day of rest shaped the rhythm of the culture. Stores closed. I remember families gathered. Church bells rang. Neighborhoods grew quiet. People slowed down. Now, of course, America has always been religiously diverse. Not everyone practiced faith the same way, but there was still a broad understanding that human beings could not live endlessly in production mode, that civilization itself needed rhythm, that families needed reconnection, that communities needed moral reflection, and that human dignity required more than constant economic activity. The founders themselves held different theological beliefs. Some were devout. Some were more influenced by Enlightenment thinking. But many agreed on one essential principle. Liberty required virtue, and virtue required moral formation, space for conscience, space for worship, space for reflection. Today, we really talk about that. Instead, modern culture often measures human value by productivity. What you produce, what you achieve, what you consume, what you post, what you monetize. But Sabbath interrupts that system. Sabbath says you are valuable even when you stop. You are human even when you rest. You are more than an economic machine. And honestly, that message may be more revolutionary today than ever before. I'll be back right after this message.
As a priest, I want to educate my members with a nonfiction book about Palestine that will give congregants a biblical perspective of the Israeli-Palestine conflict. I found this new book, Jewish Palestine, Arab Palestine 2nd edition, which was published right after President Trump took office in 2025. It explains the chronological details of the conflict and why the two-state solutions go against the Bible. I am asking my congregants to use this book in their Bible studies, and I'm getting a lot of positive feedback.
And this is Deborah Cohen, and we're talking about the upcoming National Sabbath proposed by President Trump on May 15th, 2026. The digital age and the exhaustion of the soul. Let's talk about that honestly, about modern life. America is more connected than ever before, yet many Americans have never felt more isolated. We live inside a nonstop stream of notifications, advertising, political outrage, and entertainment, fear, noise, distraction. Even moments that once felt sacred are now interrupted by screens. Families sit together while staring into separate devices. Children grow up inside algorithms. Silence itself has become uncomfortable. Stillness feels unnatural. And rest often feels unproductive. Now, think about this. The ancient Sabbath principle emerged thousands of years ago, long before smartphones, long before social media, long before 24-hour news cycles. And yet, somehow that ancient wisdom anticipated something modern civilization desperately needs. Pause, reflection, boundaries, human restoration. One day without buying, one day without performing, one day without endless consumption. One day to remember that human beings have souls. And maybe, just maybe, America's growing fascination with sacred rest is not accidental. Maybe it is a response to collective exhaustion. Maybe the soul of the nation itself is tired. Well, think about it. I remember a different America. I remember when Sundays felt quieter. Not perfect, but different. There were fewer stores open. Families often spent more time together. People visited one another. Children played outside. There was space. Now I realize not everyone experienced America the same way as I, but I think many listeners understand what I mean when I say that modern life feels accelerated. Everything is faster now. And strangely, despite all of our technology and advancement, many people feel less peaceful, not more. Maybe because human beings were never designed to live in perpetual stimulation. And perhaps that is one reason why ancient spiritual practices are resurfacing. People are craving silence, meditation, prayer, breath, community, meaning, and rest. I'll check back with you in a moment. The forgotten Hebrew roots of America. Early American leaders studied the Hebrew Bible for models of government, liberty, and moral law. Some even learned Hebrew. America did not emerge from secularism alone. It emerged from a tension between Enlightenment thought and biblical ethics. And this is Deborah Cohen. Let's talk about not theocratically, but let's talk about memory. How about that? Memory. Now, let me say something important. When people hear phrases like National Sabbath or National Day of Rest, some immediately become nervous. They worry about religious coercion or government overreach or the blending of church and state. Heaven forbid. But that is not what I'm talking about here. A national day of reflection does not require a state religion. America has always included people of different faiths and people of no faith. But shared moral rhythms have historically helped hold civilizations together. A national moment of pause would not require uniform theology. It would simply acknowledge a timeless human truth. Human beings need rest. Families need reconnection. Communities need sacred space. Nations need moral reflection. In that sense, Sabbath belongs not only to Jews or Christians, it belongs to the human condition itself. And honestly, perhaps one reason this idea feels powerful right now is because modern life has become so fragmented. People are hungry for experiences that reconnect them, not digitally, but humanly, spiritually, emotionally, communally. Imagine even one day where families unplugged from technology, neighbors gathered, communities slowed down, houses of worship opened their doors, people sat together without outrage, without politics, without algorithms, without constant stimulation. In today's world, that would almost feel radical, don't you think? So, why this matters to Judeo-Christian America? My book, Judeo-Christian America, argues something very simple. America is not merely a political experiment. It is also a moral vision, a vision influenced significantly by biblical ideas carried through both Jewish and Christian traditions. Concepts like covenant, justice, human dignity, moral law, liberty under God, sacred responsibility. These ideas helped shape the moral architecture of America. Now, that does not mean America has always lived up to its ideals. Clearly, it has not. But ideals still matter. Foundations still matter. Moral memory still matters. And if a national Sabbath principle, whether on May 15th or any other day, gains traction in public conversation, it does not create those foundations. It reveals them. It reminds Americans that beneath the noise of modern life, the original foundation still exists, waiting, not fully erased, only buried beneath distraction, consumerism, polarization, and exhaustion. Let's think about that. We will soon know. Perhaps May 15, 2026 will pass quietly, or perhaps it will mark the beginning of something larger, a cultural turning point, a reconsideration of faith, of family, of rest, of sacred time. History announces itself softly at first, a conversation, like the one I'm having with you, a symbolic gesture, a public reflection. Then years later, people look back and realize that was the moment something began shifting. And perhaps that is where America stands now, at the edge of reconsideration, at the edge of remembering, at the edge of asking whether freedom alone is enough, without moral grounding, without spiritual rhythm, without sacred pause. If and when national recognition ever comes, whether through Donald Trump or any future leader, this message will already exist. This is not a new idea. This is a return to sacred time, a return to reflection, a return to remembering that even nations need Sabbath. Thank you for joining me today. If this conversation resonated with you, please subscribe, share, and follow the future essays and podcast reflections leading up to the 4th of July and the release of my book, Judeo-Christian America. And perhaps this week before May 15th arrives, you might consider asking yourself one simple question. When was the last time you truly rested? Not physically, but spiritually. Until the next time, I'm Deborah Cohen. Shalom to your home, as my husband says, or peace, as I used to say in the 60s, or shalom to my friends in the Middle East. Let's get together, JudeoChristianAmerica.com. Thank you for listening, and I hope to see you again next week right here on Judeo-Christian America, a story and a song.
Oh, say shalom bimroma, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol Yisrael. Oh, say
I was born into a strict Catholic family where I learned to flinch before a hand was even raised. I spent my childhood waiting for a punishment I didn't understand. So I ran. I traded the pews for music college and the hymnals for a rock band in Boston. My life became a spiritual journey, one that I share with you. Deborah Cohen, music, books, and merch. Thanks for listening.